Okay, good afternoon, folks. We are here with Green Tech Solar. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us here on Cayman Mall Road, our special segment of The Pulse, where we try to keep people informed of what's happening in their community. James?
Thanks, Sandra. Much appreciated. I'm James Whitaker. I am the founder of Green Tech Solar and the president of the Cayman Renewable Energy Association.
Okay, now James, I know you from having had my solar system installed at our home, and for me, you're the go-to expert about solar. You obviously own a solar company, and you know quite a bit. Anytime people come to me asking me the sort of technical details of my solar installation, I say, listen, all I know is every month I'm saving a ton of money on my CUC bill. Go to James and his team. They're the ones who can really break it down for you in layman's terms and just explain everything that's happening. So one of the reasons that we're talking to you today is because you have positioned yourself as the industry leader in the Cayman Islands for information and for really having a knack for explaining it to people so that the average individual can just understand it and it makes sense.
I'll try my best.
Okay, great. So just a couple days ago, CUC issued a press release which we received, and to be honest, I read it and I was just a little bit confused. So let's start perhaps with some of the background details and information that would be most useful to consumers. So essentially this press release was issued on the 20th, and it said that CUC offers two programs that allow customers to interconnect renewable energy system to the grid. The first one being the consumer-owned renewable energy program called CORE, C-O-R-E. And then the second one is actually referred to as the Distributed Energy Resource, DER.
DER program.
So can you just explain to us what is CORE in layman's terms and what is DER?
Sure. So as you said, the CUC and government, through its regulator, OFREG, they have two approved programs in Cayman, one being CORE, one being DER. In regards to CORE is pretty simple. You put solar panels on your roof. That energy that's produced by the solar panel gets sold to the utility, and the utility gives you credit for all that solar that you sell. So in layman's terms, let's say your utility bill is $200. If you've got a solar system on your roof that produces $200 in credits, you sell $200 of solar to CUC, you use $200 of CUC's energy, CUC sends you a bill that says consumption $200, production, because you have solar, $200, balance owed $0. So that's how the CORE program works. You're selling solar energy to the utility, and they give you a fixed contract for 25 years to say, I will buy all the solar energy that you can produce at this rate for this term guaranteed.
Right.
So that's
Now,
the CORE program.
I'm on the CORE program.
You're on the CORE program.
Which means that for the benefit of consumers, it means that I actually have 2 meters in order to make this work from the back end, so that 1 meter can be read in terms of the solar system, and another meter was my traditional CUC meter that came with my home.
That's correct.
Okay.
So 1 meter is the energy going out, 1 meter is the energy coming in.
Okay, great. So we understand what the CORE program means. Now, are most people on the CORE program?
99% of people in Cayman are on the CORE program.
Okay.
It's one of the reasons why the CORE program is vital to not only keep alive, but to actually advance and maintain, is because it's the easiest way for consumers to access renewable energy. One could argue about what the rates would be in the subsidies, but the program itself is very bankable. It gives you a fixed rate at a fixed term, so you know what your return investment is going to be, and it's a very easy, straightforward contract, and that's really the key value of the CORE program.
Right. Now, even within the CORE program, there are people who would have gotten like different contractual terms. Is that correct? So like different rates that they're selling it back to CUC at?
Correct. So what happens is, historically, OFREG issues 1 megawatt of allocation. So your system on your roof may be 10 kilowatts. Well, there's 100 of you that apply for that. And so a certain amount of people apply for it. Once that 1 megawatt is eaten up, then what they typically do is they give you another megawatt at a lower rate. So before, the rate started out at 38.5 cents. Today they're down to about 24 cents. So over time the rates have come down, and the reason for that is the program has been subsidized. In other words, they pay you more for the solar than you actually pay for your electricity. And the idea was, and the idea generally for feed-in tariff programs, of which the CORE program is a feed-in tariff program, The idea is that it incentivizes people to use solar, and you're paying a subsidy for that. And the more people get incentivized, the lower the subsidy comes, so that it's lower cost to consumers. The ideal being to get to a point where you still have the core program, but it's at an unsubsidized level altogether, so it's not costing consumers anything, and the rate that you pay is basically the avoided cost of CUC's fuel. That's the intention of the program.
Right. Now, you've mentioned OFREG a couple times, and for the benefit of our listeners who may not be familiar with OFREG, that's the government regulatory agency that is responsible for regulating certain industries, including the energy, which includes CUC and solar companies and so on.
Correct. So OFREG is really the gatekeeper. CUC as the utility often has to get everything that they do approved through OFREG. OFREG is the regulator that essentially regulates our entire industry. They're the ones who ultimately decide what the rates are, how much the allocation is. So everything has to go through them and be approved by them.
Okay, very good. All right, so we got a good understanding of the core program. Let's move on to the DER now. What does that mean?
So just as I explained how CORE works, where you're selling the energy to the utility, the DER program, you're actually using the energy in that house or that building. So you're not selling anything. It's a consumption-based program. It's a program that's very similar to what's called net metering, but it's different in the sense that they've got fixed rates and terms as part of the program. So instead of selling power, you're using power. Now, the issue with the DER program is it's really designed for large commercial customers. The rates and the terms and the classes and how it's designed, in order for it to make economic sense, it really only makes economic sense at a certain economy of scale. That means you want to have a large solar system that would typically come, your 50, 100, 150 kilowatt solar systems. A residential house does not have that kind of space to install that many panels to make it economic, which is why it's a bit misleading to think that a core customer is going to move to a DER. A core customer has got a 10 kilowatt system or less. That is completely uneconomic in the DER. So it's really intended for large commercial customers that have large roofs, and that you put a lot of panels on the roof, and that energy is actually consumed in the building itself. It's not as bankable as the core program. For your house, you're getting a fixed rate at a fixed term, and I can guarantee you what your return on investment is going to be. With a self-consumption system, your return on investment is always indicative of what you're not spending with CUC. And of course, CUC rates always fluctuate. So your return on investments can go up or down, whereas with core, it's fixed. And so it's less bankable. So what does that mean? You typically have a cash buyer as opposed to somebody that's going to go to the bank and finance a system on the DER. So your DER program really caters to a certain segment of the consumer market, and it tends to be your large commercial customers. DER provides an incentive for solar as well as batteries. Batteries can also provide savings on the DER by lowering your demand charge. And that really depends on whether, as a commercial customer, you have a very sort of peaky demand, that the battery can actually control that demand. So it provides incentives for solar and batteries, but it's really geared towards commercial customers.
Okay, so now that we have a good understanding of the two available sort of renewable energy systems in the Cayman Islands, we received this press release from CUC that basically said that the core program, which is the first one, is going to be coming to an end or has been maximized, and that's now going to be closed out. How did we get here? It doesn't seem to me like there's a whole lot of people on solar yet in terms of the overall population. So how is it possible for the core program to be closing already?
Better regulation would have prevented this current situation from happening, in the sense that if the program was a little bit better managed, it all comes down to the capacity issue. So CUC's infusion study done years ago said basically 17 megawatts of renewable energy put onto the grid is the maximum we can do, unless there were other things done to mitigate that intermittency, right? So really what that means is now with the core program, with the DER program, and with the 5 megawatt solar farm in Bodden Town, now your 17 megawatts is fully allocated. In order to get more capacity, what needed to happen was CUC needs to install one of these large utility scale batteries. What the batteries do, it keeps the grid stable, and it allows you to put more solar onto the grid. That was put in quite a while ago, and unfortunately it took a long time for it to be approved. Now, why OFREG took as long as they took to approve it, I can't say. But the reality is that battery should have been procured and installed ideally last year, so that this year you wouldn't have a capacity issue. So what ended up happening was the battery took quite a while to approve, and now CUC is going out to procure that battery, to buy that battery, and to install that battery, which really won't be done till the end of this year.
Wow.
Well, your
So-
17 megawatts ran out in
Yes.
December. So now there's a gap between when the battery is going to be installed and more capacity is there and the program ending. There is an easy solution to this.
Yeah.
The simple solution to this is
So let me just break down what the problem is. So just in case our listeners didn't quite catch that, CUC had to submit an application to OFREG in order to be able to bring this battery into the Cayman Islands and install it on their system.
Correct.
That allows them to expand their capacity to take on additional consumers on the CORE program.
on any program,
any program.
any solar program.
Okay, so they submitted the application a while ago. For whatever reason unknown to us, that application took a long time with OFREG. And when was it approved? Do we have any idea?
It was approved late last year.
Okay, so late 2019 and December of 2019, we're looking at, okay, we're already running out of capacity on the CORE program.
Correct.
So because of that delay, CUC now feels like they have to push consumers to the DER program, which you've explained actually really isn't a system designed for the average consumer.
That's correct. It's not designed for the average consumer, and it's not going to be economically viable for the average consumer. So what really needs to happen is some of that allocation that was put into DER and some of the allocation that government has for themselves, OFREG will have to take some of that allocation and provide it for regular consumers so that it bridges this gap between when the program ended in December and now when the battery comes online.
Right.
So once that happens, then this becomes less of an issue. And once the battery does come online, then there's 29 megawatts of allocation. So you can allocate that money to all of these
Right.
allocation to all of these programs, and then there won't be an issue anymore.
Okay, so when you say there's allocation, you mean that OFREG has solar reserves? Is that basically
Correct.
what
So the
this is?
DER program right now has 3 megawatts, about a half a megawatt of which has been taken out. So there's 2.5 megawatts of reserve that isn't used right now under that program. Under the CORE program, government has a special allocation for themselves of 1 megawatt, of which only 100 kilowatts has been used, so they have 900 kilowatts there. So there are allocation reserved in these programs that isn't being accessed by average consumers, and the idea is that OFREG should approve a certain amount of that allocation to go to average consumers in the CORE program.
As an interim measure,
As an
that
interim
would
measure.
allow the CORE program to continue
Correct.
until the battery is installed.
And then once the battery is installed, the CORE program can still continue, more allocation can go to it, and then you can have robust conversations about actually improving the CORE program so that actually caters to more and more customers. Right now, CORE does it because the capacity is limited to 10 kilowatts. That capacity could be increased to 250 kilowatts, and what would happen is in the areas where DER doesn't apply or isn't economic for people, they would always have that CORE allocation that they could dip into, and you would do it at an unsubsidized rate, so it wouldn't cost consumers any more money.
Okay, so there's a solution out there. Do you know if, being in the industry, is OFREG considering that solution? It's been put on the table. What's the situation?
So OFREG has a new CEO that's been there for a few months now, and we've had some very good substantive conversations with him. I certainly think he recognizes that there are improvements that need to be made with the way that the industry is regulated, and I think he's going to do that. I know that they have put forward to the board for approval a proposal for an interim measure. I think that was in the press release as well. So we're looking to hear quite soon that interim measure has been approved. And again, once the battery comes online, none of this should really be a problem anymore.
Right. All right, folks. So again, we've been joined this afternoon by James Whitaker from Green Tech Solar, my go-to expert when it comes to anything solar related, and I'm suggesting that he should be your go-to expert as well. So if you're interested in learning more about solar panels, how to be more, energy efficient, how to go off the grid completely with a solar system for your home or small business, or even larger businesses, definitely reach out to James and his team. They have a wealth of information and resources and people who are really, really quite knowledgeable and can break it down for you. James, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
You're welcome.
And for breaking this down to, our readers and our viewers of this program here, Cayman Mall Road, bringing you the pulse And of course, we will attach the press release for those of you who are a bit more technical and would like to read all the full details of that. But we thought in this instance, a video interview would be most useful to kind of break it down so that people can understand precisely what this is all about and what's going on. So one final question, if someone right now is thinking about installing a solar system, what should they do in the most immediate future?
Still give us a call.
Okay.
We will still do a proposal for you. We expect the interim measure to be approved in a very short order. And so once that's approved, then we'll go ahead and put in your applications and install your solar systems. And then again, later on in the year, once we get actual more capacity from the battery system, we'll have a lot more capacity that more and more people can use solar.
Right.
But as long as the interim measure is approved, everything operates as per normal.
Okay, so that's wonderful. Yeah, I think a lot of people didn't even recognize that there is an agreement when they go solar that they have to engage with CUC. They still have this relationship, this ongoing relationship with CUC. So again, folks, speak to James and his team. They work with some really professional people. I can attest to that, and they can certainly inform you of what's happening in the industry, what you need to be aware of if you're considering trying to save some money on your energy bills. James, how can people contact you?
Give us a call at 949-8324, or they can email us at info@greentechsolar.ky.
Okay, great. So thank you guys again for tuning in to another edition of The Pulse here on Cayman Mall Road. Have a wonderful afternoon.